Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dana and I talk about true crime here. In this case, we are talking about scandal and murder, one of the most high-profile cases of its time. Like always, this is the beginning of the end. Some of the content in this video may be disturbing, so please, viewer discretion is advised. Pamela met Greg Smart on New Year's Eve in 1986 in New Hampshire. Pamela first saw him at a party and was drawn to him, especially his dimples, she would note in a documentary. People around them had said that they were well suited for each other, that they got along and made each other laugh. They were both attracted to each other, and after a few years of dating, the two got married on May 7th in 1989. Pamela Smart began working as a teacher at Winnacunnet High School and was also a mentor for Project Self-Esteem. Even though everything appeared to be fine in their marriage, Pamela has stated in an interview within a documentary that one night Greg did not come home. The next morning, he confessed that he had a one-time affair. This allowed for Pamela to feel that something was wrong with her, and she felt instantly and deeply betrayed. However, Pamela has stated that she still loved him even though he had an affair. On May 1st, 1990, and let me just say, as a 90s baby myself, I find it so odd how 1990 is 34 years ago. Can you guys even imagine that? Alright, anyways, back to the case. So on May 1st, 1990, Pamela came home to her and Greg's condo and found that it appeared to be ransacked and that her husband, Greg, was lying lifeless and was murdered. On a 911 call, a neighbor tells the police that their neighbor is lying unconscious and that the wife is seemingly hysterical. The police ask if they know why he is unconscious, and the neighbor said she did not know. There were four suspects that were quickly identified by the police. Two were in Greg's home, where he was shot and killed, and the other two were driving the getaway car. Now, here is where the story gets more and more intricate, and a motive for the prosecution emerges. One of the boys that was involved was named Billy or William Flynn, who was 16 but had met Pamela when he was 15, as he was at the high school Pamela worked at. The other boy was 17-year-old Pete Randall, who broke in Greg's home with Billy. Raymond Fowler and J.R. Latimer were the getaway drivers outside Greg's condo. The police became too suspicious of why a student would kill Greg, who happened to be Pamela's husband and whom Pamela knew on a professional, and we will find out as well as personal, level. Billy was the one to pull the trigger, and he and his friends, who all helped in one way or another, were held and accountable and would be tried in court alongside Pamela Smart. Now, before the trials, within the investigation, Pamela asked to be spoken with by the detectives, and two detectives spoke with her and asked her what had happened the day of the murder. She said she called Greg at 3 p.m. or so, and that she was in a meeting that ran long and arrived back home around 10:30 p.m. Pamela notices the lights were off, and thought that was a little bit unusual, and the door was slightly open, and when she pushed it all the way open, she saw Greg lying on the floor, but there was no blood. When she looked up, she saw her home appear to be ransacked, so she went to a neighbor and asked for help, believing that criminals could still have been at her home. When police came to the scene, they found Greg's wallet and his wedding ring, and felt that this was not a robbery gone wrong, although it was being painted that way, especially by Pamela. More examination was done that Greg was shot execution style. The police then start to believe that this was a homicide due to Greg's gambling and that maybe he had gotten involved with the wrong kind of people. It was one of the theories and one of the leads that they had. They also looked into drug use because they did find some marijuana in his truck, so they thought that maybe that could have played a role as well. Maybe he owed someone money in organized crime, but that lead went away and became a dead end, just like all the other leads. The funeral for the 24-year-old Greg Smart showed a devastated Pamela Smart. The news of this murder quickly hit the news in the New England community. The trial would be one of the most famous and televised of its time. This was one of the largest stories in Derry. With no new leads and the police suspicious of the murder and it not being a robbery gone wrong, they get a break in the case on May 14th, 1990, when somebody called the station. The woman on the line claimed that she heard the wife, Pamela, and that she was the one who had planned the murder. It was an anonymous tip from a woman. She said that she works at a restaurant and overheard a teenage coworker talking about how a woman wanted to kill her husband. The woman said that Cecilia Pierce knows more about this. Cecilia Pierce was an intern of Pamela Smart. Cecilia was initially impressed by Pamela as Pamela was young, educated, married, and had a job. When she first talked to detectives, she initially says that she does not know anything about the murder. The police suspect that Pamela Smart had something to do with the murder, but there was no physical evidence or anything that linking her to the crime. On June 10, 1990, a man came to the police station 6 weeks after the murder and said he wanted to show something to the police. A friend of his teenage son told him that his gun was possibly used to kill Greg Smart. The detective took a look at the gun, and the man said the gun was a .38 caliber pistol, which was the same type of gun that killed Greg Smart. So they interviewed his son, Ralph Welch. He was taken in by the man who came in the station called Mr. Latimer. Ralph Welch heard rumors that his friends may have been involved in the murder, saying Billy was bragging about it. He began detailing what he knew from his friends, and he said that Pam was involved. Ralph was putting the pieces of the puzzle together for the police. Knowing that the boys all go to the same high school where Pamela worked at, Billy and Cecilia both knew Pamela due to being a mentor as well at the high school. The police began starting to put some new pieces together. Pamela also collected life insurance money, and the police are finding that this could also have been a motive for Pamela to be involved in the murder. The police got warrants for the boys they think were involved, but they were nowhere to be found. It was a small town, and word got out, and the boys tried to go undetected. They were soon arrested, but their names were not shown in the media or in the press, since they were minors. Pamela wanted to know who were arrested and found out who they were. And then, later on, she had talked to Billy's mother and found out who had gotten arrested. The detectives tried questioning the boys, Billy Flynn, Pete Randall, and J.R. Latimer. They also talk with Pamela Smart, and Pamela brings her mother to the interview. They told her that she would be in serious trouble if she doesn't cooperate and give information about what she knows about the murder of her husband. She left that day without giving much to detectives. Cecilia was afraid that she would be arrested for the things that she knows, so Cecilia decided to cooperate with the police and gave them more information. She eventually reveals that Pamela and Billy had a romantic relationship when the detectives asked what the nature of the relationship between Pamela and Billy was, and that she had once walked in on them having sex. She also said that Pamela told her that she was in love with Billy. When an interviewer tried to interview Pamela about how she felt about the news about people being arrested for the murder of her husband, Pamela just said that she was too devastated to give an interview and too devastated to even try. The interviewer felt that this was strange, as wouldn't she be happy that people were being arrested and going to be held accountable for her husband's murder? After the police arrest Billy, Patrick or Pete Randall, and J.R. or Vance Latimer, they begin to suspect that Pamela had something to do with her husband's murder. They believe that the murder was her idea. They began to talk with Cecilia Pierce, again, a teenager at the time, and Cecilia decided to cooperate with the police by telling the police that Pamela and Billy were having an inappropriate romantic relationship, and this affair happened when Billy was 15. Police asked Cecilia how this affair started, and Cecilia said that she and Billy and JR all met Pamela as she was an adult mentor at the high school. Pamela and Billy worked on an orange juice commercial, and Pamela and Billy became closer by spending more and more time alone away from the high school. They then started to have a sexual relationship gradually over the months. Once the police found out about the affair, they asked Cecilia about what she knows about the murder of Greg Smart. Cecilia stated that Pamela was the one behind the murder. Cecilia didn't think that Pamela actually wanted to kill Greg, but in hindsight, she realizes that Pamela wanted to murder her husband. The police had Cecilia call Pamela, and the call was being recorded. Cecilia started talking, trying to get some information, but Pamela did not give up anything during the phone call. Instead, the new plan was to wire Cecilia and record an in-person conversation between Cecilia and Pamela. So, Cecilia went to go speak with Pamela, and the conversation went as follows. Pamela: "Where are you going? The Derry police." Cecilia: "Yeah, but what I was saying is, obviously I knew about it beforehand, and if I get up there and lie, and if they find out about it after, I'm going to get in trouble." Pamela: "Well, if you knew about it beforehand, just say you didn't know about it beforehand." Cecilia: "Well, I did know about it beforehand." Pamela: "Yeah, but if you say that, you're going to get in trouble anyway, so you're better off lying." The police found this very suspicious of Pamela and felt that she may be guilty of trying to murder her husband. On August 1st, 1991, the Derry police decided there was enough evidence to arrest Pamela Smart, and they went to where she was working and arrested her. She was a grieving widow and now a prime suspect. The case was sensationalized in the media. The people were fascinated by the case and also that Pamela was having an affair with her student. The attention was first locally, then nationally, then became known worldwide. Pamela maintained her innocence. The media was already outside where there was a photographer and news broke that Pamela had been arrested. During the trial, Paul Maggiato was the lead prosecutor of the case. Months go by and not one of the teenage boys involved in the murder broke their silence and offered up more information. Maggiato decided to charge them as adults, and soon enough, they were, after 4 months of court hearings. Billy Flynn, J.R. Van Slatamy, and Patrick Repeat Randall all became certified as adults. Knowing they could face life in prison without the possibility of parole, they started to talk and give authorities more information. The boys were questioned and said that Pamela had planned the murder of Greg Smart. Maggiato offers them a plea agreement if they testify saying that not only did Pamela know about the murder prior, but also planned it. In January 28, 1991, all three pled guilty to second-degree murder and took the plea deal. Attention then began to be focused on Pamela Smart. Mark Sisti was Pamela Smart's trial lawyer. He was one of the best attorneys at the time, especially due to his cross-examination skills. He scrutinized the prosecution for creating the narrative that the boys were more or less innocent and that the media was portraying Pamela in an extremely negative light, and that the coverage was intensified in trying to get people to become sympathetic to the boys, although they chose to murder Greg Smart. Judge Douglas Gray gets a petition for a request to broadcast the trial, and the judge agreed to do so. This was the first live broadcasted criminal trial in America. Everyone wanted to tune in and know the details. After 10 months after the murder, the trial began. Prosecution focused on Pamela Smart and that she was behind the murders and got Greg killed even though she didn't pull the trigger. However, there was no physical evidence tying Pamela to the crime. They also painted the teenage boys as innocent young boys manipulated by an adult who had bad intentions. Then they focused on how the Smart marriage was actually not as great as it seemed and that Pamela wanted to get out of the relationship. They also brought up the life insurance policy as a motive. The defense tries to shift the focus to the teenage boys since they were the ones who were part of the murder. Sisti said that they conspired and plotted to murder Greg Smart and that Pamela did not plan the murder, and now they were plotting a conspiracy that Pamela was the brains behind the murder, and that the teenage boys involved each had a minor criminal history and they didn't need Pamela's help to murder Greg. J.R. Latimer, who didn't go inside the house but was outside in the getaway car and drove them away, he said on the stand that they had planned to kill Gregory Smart but they needed a car, but they didn't have a car, so they asked Pamela to help and she shows up with a car. Then in the car, they all, including Pamela, discussed how to commit the murder. One of them suggested a knife, but Pamela says no since she has white furniture and she didn't want any bloodstains. Then they discussed how Pamela should react to the murder when she finds Greg murdered. J.R. Latimer said that he helped commit the murder because he was trying to help his friend Billy and was going to get money from Greg's life insurance policy. Then Billy Flynn was on the stand and said that the orange juice commercial that he did with Pamela Smart made them closer, and he admitted he was instantly attracted to Pamela. In February 1990, he got a note from Cecilia passed from Pamela for how she was interested in Billy. Then the prosecutor asked if Billy had sex with Pamela and that he was a virgin when he met Pamela. The day after they had sex, Pamela tells him that her husband needed to die if he wanted to be with her, and if he loves her, he would do this for her. Billy asked if she could get a divorce. She said she couldn't because she would lose everything, which included her home, furniture, and car. When asked what happened on May 1st, he said that they were waiting for Greg to come home, and they were let in the house with the help of Pamela. They made it look like a robbery and waited for Greg for hours. Greg finally came home, and they wrestled with Greg until they had him on his knees. Greg asked what was going on, and Billy told him to shut up. Billy said he pointed the gun at his head and stood there for what seemed like an eternity. He said, "God forgive me," and after he said that, he pulled the trigger. Pamela also went on the stand and maintained her innocence and stated that Billy committed the murder because she wanted to break up with him. The defense was trying to paint the picture that Billy was so in love with Pamela that he would do anything for her, including killing her husband. On August 20, 1992, Billy Flynn is sentenced to 28 years to life in prison for second-degree murder as part of his negotiated plea deal. Patrick or Pete Randall received 40 years to life with 12 years of the minimum sentence deferred for second-degree murder. That sentence was later reduced. Vladimir, who drove the getaway car, was sentenced to 18 years to life, and Fowler, who was in the car, was sentenced to 15 to 30 years. All the boys involved are currently out of prison. Pamela Smart was convicted for being an accomplice of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. For decades, Pamela said she was innocent of killing her husband, Greg. Recently, as of this year, Pamela has stated that she accepts responsibility for the murder of her husband, but she did not go into detail for why she is responsible. Pamela was quoted saying, "I had to acknowledge for the first time in my own mind and my own heart how responsible I was. Because I had deflected blame all the time, I think almost as if it was a coping mechanism, because the truth of being so responsible was very difficult for me." Pamela has tried to appeal her sentence on a few occasions, and each time they were denied, and she was not granted parole. People suspect she is finally admitting that she was responsible in order to get a hearing for parole. This case involved not only murder but manipulation and ultimately costed a young Gregory Smart his life. Some have believed that Pamela was innocent, and others believe that she was the one behind her husband's murder. Now, with Pamela coming forward saying she is responsible, opinions may have changed. My heart goes out to Gregory Smart and his family and loved ones. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. As always, we pray for the families and the victims and their loved ones, and that these horrible crimes result in justice for the family and victims. Until next time.